Welcome to all our audience for another episode of Money Matters.
With the Wealth Whisperer.
Today, we will try to take on one of the most imperfect planning matters, and that is college savings planning. To make the topic even more fun, I've invited as a guest a topic expert on FAFSA, which stands for Free Application for Financial Student Aid, Tina Steele. Tina, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to being here.
Oh, it's going to be fun. Tina decided to be very descriptive in the naming of a firm that she founded, and she runs the FAFSA Guru. You and I have spoken previously, Tina, and I found you to have a wealth of knowledge. I look forward to helping our audience become a little bit more educated on the FAFSA and the scholarship process. I have a list of questions, but I ask you to feel free. At any time, redirect us. If there's something based upon your experience that's more relevant or helpful to our audience that you want to educate us on at all. All right. I want to kick off today with probably becomes the immediate concern. I can just see the stress level going through the roof when I've gotten this question from clients in the past. And that is, can you just walk through the steps that parents and students need to take as it pertains to getting their FAFSA application in?
Absolutely, 100%. That's one of the most common questions. So, the very first thing that any student and parent should do before filling out a FAFSA form is creating what's called their FSA ID. This is a unique username and password that allows them to log in and fill out the information electronically. Every single student that fills out a FAFSA needs an FSA ID. And if that student's parents are married, living together, then only one parent needs an FSA ID. Now, there's different scenarios where both parents might need one, such as they both, they're married, but they filed separate taxes, because that FSA ID is actually pulling the tax information into the FAFSA. So the student and at least one parent in most cases will need one. And then they each log in individually to the FAFSA website, starting with the student. The student will log in with their FSA ID, fill out the student section, sign it. Then the parent will log in with their FSA ID, fill out the parent section, and sign it. So it's kind of, it's not as complicated as people make it seem. When the student does log in to fill out their section, they will be prompted to invite a parent as a contributor. And then it will guide the student as to which parent they need to invite. In some cases, it's both parents.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question for you. Unfortunately, in today's society, not all parents are married.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know that strategically there are certain things that should and can be done. Do you have any insight as it pertains to in that situation where the parents are divorced, who it is
Yeah.
they should be inviting?
Yeah. So if parents are divorced or separated, only one parent needs to fill out the FAFSA. And federal regulations say it's the parent who provided more than 50% of the student's support within the last year, regardless of who the student lives with and regardless of which parent claims the student on their taxes.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome. So really my trick potentially could work well. And what I'm getting to is you'll have some instances where you'll have divorced and the income disparity is just dramatic.
hmm
So in that particular instance, what do you suggest people do?
So, as a professional, I obviously have to advise people to fill it out the way it's supposed to be filled out. So,
Yeah.
in a lot of cases, the parent who has a lesser income might be the primary parent, where the
Or
student
often
resides with
that's
that
one of the
parent
reasons
the
why
most.
is they have a lot
Yeah.
more of the parental responsibilities.
Right, right. So that would be the parent that I would go with. The only time I've ever seen like a red flag happen with that would be like if parents are divorced, let's say mom makes lower income, mom fills out the FAFSA, but then, she's reporting child support received that is equal to or even exceeds her income. In that
Okay.
situation, then it might be a red flag. And they might say, hey, it looks like dad pays more, than half the support. We need to go with dad's income.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good. All right. So after they fill out the after they assign an ID that both the parents, what then happens? What do they need to do?
So when the student fills out the student section, that he or she can list up to 20 different colleges on the FAFSA that he or she is planning on attending. So they don't have to be admitted before doing that. It can just be all the colleges they're thinking about applying to. So what will happen is once the FAFSA is fully completed and submitted, it will go directly to those. First, it'll go to the government, and a complicated federal methodology will be performed to come up with what's called a student aid index number, which we'll get into. And then the government will send that SAI number along with the FAFSA information to all the college financial aid offices. And the college financial aid offices will use that information to put together a financial aid offer and send that directly to the student. So students will see very different financial aid packages across the board for this reason, because colleges have different amounts of financial aid and endowment money and things like that to offer.
Who should fill out the FAFSA form?
So everybody should fill out the FAFSA form.
Okay.
I work with families that range from lower income all the way up to $500,000 a year. I would say probably the majority of families I work with are in the $150,000 to $400,000 a year range. And
Okay.
a lot of times, they think, it's not worth it. I'm not going to get any money. And even worst case scenario, what I say is, okay, maybe your income's too high to qualify for any need-based aid, but at the very least, you can try to appeal your financial aid offer. So the student can actually write a financial aid appeal letter, leverage other financial aid offers like merit scholarship and things like that, and appeal it. But in order to appeal, you have to go through the motions and fill out the forms and get an actual financial aid offer.
Got it.
So it's 100% worth, unless somebody, of course, just has, $400,000, $300,000 to $400,000 sitting aside to earmark for education. I just think it's worth filling it out for
Okay.
everybody. Yeah.
Very good. Very helpful information. All right. When is the window for filling out the FAFSA? And are there different windows per institution for financial aid and scholarships?
So the FAFSA opens October 1st of every year. So the FAFSA that opened this past October was for the actual fall of 26 and the spring of 27.
So
So
I'd
it
like to
opens
reiterate
early.
something that you had said previously is you don't have to actually be applying to the institution. So if you're in there in October, you may not have that great of an idea of where it is that ultimately you're going to go or even apply to, but you can still start the FAFSA process if you want, because you don't have to just list the ones that you're applying to and have a desire to attend.
Yes, and the thing is, this is where a lot of families think I need to apply for all my colleges first, and they miss out, on that timely filing, which can make a difference. You can
Okay.
go into the FAFSA at any time and add colleges. So, get it submitted first for sure. And then, I'm a big proponent of filing early. So the FAFSA opens October 1st. I always tell families get it done in October if you can.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
November at the latest. There's also all colleges, like you asked about, deadlines for scholarships and things like that. All colleges have like priority filing deadlines for their financial aid forms. So if a student's applying early action or early decision,
Yeah.
especially, they need to adhere to those priority deadlines and not miss them because they could miss out on financial aid.
Oh, okay.
So
Everybody take note of that. That sounds important.
yeah, very important. So if you fill it out in October, you're really kind of, not jeopardizing any financial aid because you're just getting it done.
Awesome. Great. I understand that between 22 and 47% of the parent's income is used to determine the parental contribution. What
Yes.
number are they using for income, and why do some have to pay a higher percentage than others?
So they're calculating a couple different things. They're calculating adjusted gross income and then net income. And then that percentage is based on the number of people in the family and the age of the oldest parents, in addition to investments that might be owned and like the tax income bracket they're falling into. So it's a very, like I said before, complicated methodology that's happening. A good rule of thumb I always say is that student aid index number that they're coming up with by calculating all these numbers can easily be 25 on average, 25 to 30% of a family's annual income. And then in addition, increased by like another 5 to 6% of whatever investment value that they have listed
Okay.
on the FAFSA.
Okay, so in the process, where the world has become a lot more technical, maybe it's not as subjective as it used to be, and maybe it's more objective. Are you uploading a tax return, or are you answering questions? How are you getting your income, to the FAFSA group?
So they've really streamlined it the last couple of years. So with that FSA ID, provided you filed your taxes 6 weeks prior to filling out the FAFSA, it's an automatic upload. When you log in, it asks a question if you approve of them getting the tax information from the IRS. You hit approve and it just pulls it in automatically. It kind of X's out the figures so you can't really see anything, but
Mhm.
it's made it really easy. So the majority of what families are entering really comes down to just a few questions about, money in their bank accounts, investment value, um, and things like that. So it's, I mean, they went from 108 questions on the FAFSA down to the maximum is like 56 questions now. It's
Okay.
much more streamlined.
Yeah, but still, people just heard that 56 and they start sweating. All right. To the 56. And so some of them are going to be around what counts as an asset and what does not count as an asset.
Yeah.
I can think of some, but I don't have, a small, I have a small percentage of the knowledge of this matter that you do. So can we open some dialogue around, some of the assets that count and don't count?
Sure. There's essentially only two assets that are protected that you don't have to report on the FAFSA. One would be the value of your retirement accounts. So you never have to list those. And the other would be the value of the primary home that you currently reside in.
So
So you don't,
IRAs, 401ks, Roths, the
yeah,
home that you reside in. What if
right.
you reside in two? Like, no, nobody resides in two.
So you have to pick one as your primary,
Yeah.
and then you have to list the value or equity and any other property you own, even if it's funneled into like an LLC or business.
Not that a lot of people have money in life insurance, but if I'm not mistaken, life insurance assets are not included
Right.
either. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
All right. So the dominant ones are people's 401ks, IRAs, Roths, and then the equity within your primary residence.
Right. And, that just applies to the FAFSA. Keep in mind, I know we'll touch on this, I'm sure. The CSS profile is a whole different ball game.
Yeah.
Some colleges require that, and there are no protected assets. So,
Yep, we'll talk a little bit about
yeah,
that. I think I have a question specifically to that later. All
perfect.
right. So you had intimated, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a bit, that 5 to 6% of parents' assets are deemed. I know that 50% of child's income is deemed available for college expenses. That sounds pretty significant, as if you'd be like, hey, no, don't go get a part-time job. You're going to kill your financial aid. Is there an amount that they can earn that before they start looking at 50%, the child?
Yeah, I mean, it for dependent students, it's really not going to be a big issue until they get up to around like $15,000 a year, which dependent students don't typically earn that. So yeah, it's really not going to impact anything until they get to that amount.
Okay. So you would have to be careful, though. I mean, I guess people that have more money sometimes will put money into the children's name and, potentially have them selling stock at their tax
Yeah.
bracket. Or I guess I remember, you probably don't want to have your 18-year-old kid gambling and making so much money that they're going to the window and having to take that as income. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So there are actually certain things you would have to pay attention to, but hopefully those are just first world type problems.
Right.
Okay, good. What percent of the child's money is deemed usable for college?
So again, it depends on the income that they earn. And then they also look at family size, which kind of shifts that a little bit too. So when it's a dependent student, it's just, I would say, to be honest, like the majority of families I work with and dependent students, it's a very rare that I ever have anybody that even has that higher income. But they do, after a certain, depending on the family size and a certain amount, they'll look at basically it would inflate that student aid index number. It could inflate it by about half of their income.
Yeah, so the question was more of their asset, not their income.
Oh, their assets. Sorry.
Yeah.
So yeah, 20%. They get hit hard there. So
Okay.
any assets they have, 20%.
All right, so here's where I'm going to get involved because this is a world of which I live on a daily basis. What I live on a daily basis and what I call financial planning as it pertains to college planning to be very imperfect is because when you have a child and many of my clients will, get a social security number. Now you get it, you're getting it almost immediately if you're proactive about it, through the hospital where you've given birth. And as soon as they get that social security number, they're establishing college accounts. Okay, what is a
Yeah.
college account? So there are a multitude of registrations that can be used for college savings. All right. Um, the most predominant is the 529. So
Mhm.
I'm certain that a lot of people that you deal with, Tina, you're having to find out how much money do you have in 529s.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Right.
So, as Tina implied earlier, it's between 5 and 6% of what is in the 529 would be deemed as eligible to be used for college expenses. The actual number is 5.64,
Exactly.
right? But then Tina already answered the question of money that is actually held in the child's name. All right. Children under what is known as majority age are not permitted to have an investment account. Okay. They cannot legally enter into a contract. So they can have custodial accounts. And there's two different types of custodial accounts that exist. One is what is known as a UTMA. When I started in this industry more than 30 years ago, there were no 529s. So parents and grandparents were putting money into UTMAs, which is an actual gift to that child. Yet you retain an adult as custodian over those assets. So they're responsible for making investment decisions. And as Tina said previously, 20% of all UTMA monies are deemed as usable for college. So when 529s came into play, it sort of changed the planning strategy a little bit. There are people that are worth so much money and have so much income that they'll never get a dime from FAFSA. And so you still see a lot of UTMAs being held by those individuals. And there are some advantages to such. But, if you're thinking there may be some availability of some aid to you, scholarship, loans, grants, government grants, or otherwise, 20% of the UTMA, unless you're filling out the CSS. And what I'm told on the CSS is 25% of the UTMAs or accounts that are being held directly by the child is available for college expenses.
Yeah.
I did mention there are two custodial accounts. There's something known as custodial Roths. Custodial Roths, since they are deemed retirement accounts, none of those are deemed as accessible for college expenses. Okay? All right, Tina, back over to you. What is
Awesome.
CSS and how does it differ from FAFSA?
The CSS profile is a supplemental financial aid form that some colleges require in order to determine how much of their need based institutional scholarship money they're going to award. So we see a lot of private colleges require the CSS.
Okay.
With that said, there are some public institutions that do also, but these would be the colleges that have significant endowment money. So when they're looking at awarding need based scholarship money, they want to take a deeper dive into a family's finances before awarding that. So in a situation where parents are divorced or separated, when a college requires the CSS profile, they're looking at both custodial and non custodial parent information. In the majority of cases, there's a handful of colleges that do not require the non custodial CSS, but I mean, just a handful. There's over 300 colleges in the US that require it. And in those situations, divorced and separated parents would still both have to complete one. So there are no protected assets on the CSS. You have to pretty much put everything on there, the retirement, the primary home. Some colleges ask some supplemental questions, even about like the type of car you drive and things like that.
Wow.
So what happens is when a family has to fill out both, this student aid index number they get from the FAFSA is often different than the CSS. The one on the CSS is higher. And then that's the number the colleges use to determine their institutional need-based scholarship money.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the CSS is something that you'll be prompted by an institution. So how will you know that you should be filling out the CSS?
Not necessarily. I come across families a lot of times that didn't even realize they were supposed to fill it out and they miss important deadlines. So yeah, the best way to find out, just Google colleges that require the CSS. It'll pull up the list from the College Board website in alphabetical order, and it will tell you exactly which colleges require it. And then you want to look at the deadline, the priority deadline of the college, because each college is different. And then the other important thing to know, the FAFSA you have to fill out every year, and it depends on the college in terms of the CSS profile. In some cases, you only fill it out the first year, but in other cases, you have to fill it out all 4 years.
Oh, okay. and you'll be prompted? How do you know whether you're doing it every year?
Again, you have to, it's not always easy. Some colleges will send an email, some won't. Sometimes you just have to look at the college website or you have to ask the financial aid office, is this something I have to do every year? They usually do outline it on their website, but it is something that you can miss if you're not kind of digging a little bit for it. So
Okay, so
I
when
would
an initial offer is made, um, does it often say whether this is something that automatically rolls over into future years? Is that something that generally comes with the offer?
only if the family, not necessarily, because basically financial aid is evaluated on a yearly basis. The
Okay.
only thing that would roll over, like, or you'd be given all 4 years, would be that initial merit scholarship when a student applies for admission. The college is looking at their admission application and then determining how much merit scholarship money they're going to award, if any. And usually, when a student gets admitted to college, they get their merit scholarship offer along with that for all 4 years.
I got it. Yeah, if I
Yeah.
have to think of personal experience with clients and with my children, it seems that, if your student is anything above average at all, there seems to be merit available to most.
Yeah, it's got to be careful because there's a lot of colleges out there that merit is very competitive. So not every student will receive it, and then
Not
there's some
everyone.
colleges, nope, and then there's some colleges that don't even offer it at all.
Got
So
it.
I think one of the biggest misperceptions of parents and high school seniors or high performing high school students is because they're so high achieving, they're going to get these great merit scholarships, which is not always the case and can be very disappointing when the time comes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess it has to do with supply and demand, of course.
Hmm.
Is the more in demand the institution is, the less likely they have to worry about offering merit scholarship. Because
Right.
my experience has been, Ohio has great state schools. I'm originally from New York, which has magnificent state schools. How's Maine's? How's Maine's state schools?
Mainstay schools are pretty good. I mean,
Good.
we have and then we have our Ivy League of Maine, Bowdoin, Bates, and Colby. So
Yeah. So that being said, what I found is if you have that above average student, but they're not getting into the Ivy League. And you're looking at state schools and you're looking at some of these private institutions. And I think most people have become very aware of the competitiveness in private schools. It's very hard for these private schools these days.
yeah,
So I always kid around that a lot of these private, a lot of these, I'm not going to call them Ivy League level private schools, but, you know, middle of the road or above middle of the road is they will have like buying new cars used to be. They have the sticker price and then what you'll actually pay, and nobody actually pays sticker price as long as they act. Here's where some of your roles come in. So let's transition this over to any child who has now filled out these forms, received an offer. What's your ability to debate, negotiate? Tell me a little about what it is that you do or what it is that you've seen successful parents do.
so I think every student should appeal their financial aid offer, unless the college has like a blanket statement where they say we will only accept financial aid appeals if you have special circumstances. There's kind of two different ways to appeal. If a family has special financial circumstances, such as reduced income, or a big one is if the income was inflated on the tax return that was used on the FAFSA due to a one-time source of income, such as a distribution or capital gain, colleges will look at that as a special circumstance.
Sale of a business or sale of a
Yeah, right, right. So,
property.
I mean, if a family has those or like significant out-of-pocket medical or dental expenses or elder care expenses, even private K through 12 education expenses for other children, some colleges will consider, then they should definitely go through the motions and appeal through a special circumstances process. Now, if they don't, which I would say is probably about 75% of the families I help, they don't have any special circumstances at all. They're just writing a humble financial aid appeal letter to the college financial aid office using some key strategies, leveraging other, financial aid offers they received or lower net out of pocket costs, you know, and there's some other things that would normally go into a letter. And they're sending it to the college financial aid office. And statistically, about 75 to 80% of the families I've helped through this process will receive some additional financial aid. The state schools, public schools can be a little bit harder because their hands are more tied. With that
Okay.
said, they do come back and I have seen them offer more aid, but definitely the private colleges. They have
Okay.
run
And
down
so
their
what I'm
money.
speaking, I think, is outside of FAFSA, is where you probably help people with the negotiation. And
Right.
what I'm speaking to is where I've helped clients before, because I did this myself, is I literally played the cost of colleges off of each other and said, here, ultimately, this is where we decide, ultimately decide where you want the child to go, and the child decided where they go, and everybody's in agreement. But the cost is a certain amount above the second opportunity, which we're more than happy to go to, but we want to take another swing of the bat at the first one. It's just being offered at a price that just may not be conducive to the family. And I've seen in those instances, and I've suggested to clients, and I've seen many of people be successful with those private institutions and getting back. That's merit that I'm now talking about. Is that right?
Well, they're not really getting merit. So what happens is the colleges are dipping into their pool of need-based scholarship money to help close the financial aid gap. Merit scholarship is usually appealed directly through the college admissions office.
That's what I'm
And that,
talking about. I'm talking about
yeah,
the discussion with the not through FAFSA at all,
okay. So you're
but
talking about the
directly
merit, so
getting a
which are two
hold
different things.
of
Yeah,
your point of contact and
yeah,
having them going to bat for you because
yeah.
that person is an advocate for you.
Right. Yeah.
And
So merit,
they, to a certain extent, are responsible for um, recruiting,
right.
some of these college seniors, when I'm using the word recruiting a student, I'm once again talking about kids that they got like a 3.4, 3.4, 3.6 in high school. These aren't kids that have, we know they have these crazy 5.0s now, you know,
Right.
but these are kids that are mildly above average. And
Hmm.
so there's an appeal that's taking place between generally the parents and the institution itself through that recruiting officer who's
Right.
helped you along to that point.
Yeah, definitely. There are, you know, those can be fruitful. It just kind of depends on the college.
Okay.
Usually, what I see is like if the students' grades are bumped up or, with in the last quarter or something, they might be more apt to come back and offer more money. But they should still appeal through the financial aid office because what happens is they get, 20,000 merit at this college, 10,000 at this one. The $10,000 merit scholarship college, if they appeal through the financial aid office, they might come back with some of their need-based scholarship money to close that gap and give them more of that need-based scholarship to make it closer to the 20. So that's where, those are the types of appeals. I focus on those appeals solely because they just tend to be more successful.
Awesome. All
Yeah.
right. I think there are so many, if we make this political, this would then just be a disaster.
Mm.
But I'm going to speak to the fact that I think most people would agree that if a student has worked hard, gotten the grades, we'd love every student, regardless of financial background, to be given the opportunity to further their education. So the nuances of what comes through a loan, what comes through a grant. So as it pertains to FAFSA, how does that dynamic work? We said, okay, we're going to provide you this much in a grant, but we also have this much available through a government sponsored loan. How does that
Okay.
all?
So every student will get awarded a federal direct loan. I'll speak to that first. Federal direct loan is a guaranteed loan, not based on credit. Every student will receive. But for dependent students, the amounts they can borrow are minimal. 5,500 their first year, 6,500 their second year, 7,500 their third and fourth year, which is nowhere near what the, cost of attendance is. So how colleges determine the financial aid offer, let's take the FAFSA and, that goes to the government for processing. They come up with that student aid index. So just to kind of use some numbers, let's say a family earns $150,000 a year. Remember, I said before that student aid index could easily be up to like 25 to 30% of that annual income. So we'll go on the high side because we'll factor in maybe that they have some investments also. Let's say the student aid index number is $50,000 for this family. What the college does is they take their cost of attendance. Let's say the college is 80,000. They subtract the SAI number of 50,000, and the difference between those two numbers is the student's financial need. So in this scenario, the student would have $30,000 in financial need if they were to attend college A that's $80,000.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't mean they're going to get $30,000 in financial aid because then colleges meet anywhere between 20 and 100% of a student's financial need, depending on the
Okay.
college. So if it's a college that meets 100% of a student's financial need, they'll see about $30,000 in need-based financial aid, which would be in scholarships and maybe work study and a subsidized direct loan, because that's considered need-based because the government pays the interest on that
Oh,
um,
okay.
while the student's in school. And if it's a college that only meets 50% of financial need, they might only see about 15,000 in the free money. And then the rest, they would get the direct loan and then they can borrow other loans to close the financial aid gap for the difference.
Okay, how about let's talk state schools or even community colleges initially. So let's talk a family has $30,000 of income.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm really talking about somebody who's one worrying through their entire high school. They're working real hard. They want to go to college, but they're sitting there going, "There's no way my parents going to be able to, afford to do such."
Right,
How does that work for
right,
that student? What's
right.
what's available to them where there's going to be very little money from their family or themselves to pay towards, but they are committed to making the best of their situation and for their future.
So any family where the income is $60,000 or less,
Okay.
they are going to have the lowest student aid number they can have, which is good when it comes to financially aid, which means they're going to get the maximum aid. So there is a federal Pell Grant the government offers for up to just under $7,400 a year in free money that most, any family under 60,000 that doesn't have any significant investment value, like a student will receive that. They
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, and
I assume that most community colleges are still below that number.
yeah, so community colleges in those cases, they could pretty much get their community college paid for free.
Great. Now they go through the 2 years. They're an AB student at the community college, and now they're going to go to a state school, and the all-in for that state school is $30,000. How does that work for that family under 60,000?
So then so basically if that school's 30,000 and they would have like a zero SAI, let's say, or negative 1,500, let's say zero to make it easy, their financial need would be about $30,000. Then they have to see, it depends on how much financial need state schools meet, which I see range anywhere from 30 to usually 70%. State
Okay.
schools aren't able to meet 100% of financial needs. So let's just use 50% as an average.
Oh, good. Okay.
If their needs 30,000, they might see about 15,000 in
A
the
year. So they're getting out of
financial aid.
college with 30. If they do it in 4 years, they're out of college with $30,000 in
Right.
in loans, probably.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. So it's doable. Definitely
Yeah.
doable.
So every child is being provided that opportunity. I think that is awesome.
Yep.
Okay. I think I already so as it pertains to whatever financial aid we're talking about, grants or otherwise, are there requirements that the children need to adhere to per GPA? Okay, hey, we're going to give you this merit-based, but this merit-based is dictated whether you'll be reevaluated annually, and it's not just a financial thing, but it's also your standing with the university from a grade standpoint.
Yeah. It is pretty, you do have to kind of be aware of that. I mean, it varies from college to college, but, colleges do reserve the right, if they're not keeping up with their grades and academics to take money away. So very, very important that if you get if you get awarded money based on merit, that you keep those grades up.
Um, how will private scholarships affect financial aid? Do you have to, if you've already been awarded certain scholarships, does that have to be noted on your FAFSA or otherwise?
Yeah, usually financial aid offices will, send out a questionnaire about that to ask about any outside scholarships, or they might, ask it on the CSS profile. And it depends on if the scholarship does scholarship stacking or scholarship displacement. So if a college in there, it depends on the college. So if a college has what's called scholarship displacement, any outside scholarship you receive will reduce your need-based financial aid by that amount. So if it's a
Okay.
family that's not getting any need-based aid, it's a moot point, right? But if it's a family that is getting need-based aid, that can hurt. If they do scholarship stacking, basically any what happens is they're looking at the student's financial need, right? So the difference between the cost of attendance and the student aid index. Their
Yeah.
total need-based aid, including outside scholarship money, cannot exceed that. So if it's a college that meets 100% of a financial need, it's probably not really going to be worth a student going out and getting those outside scholarships because they're just going to start taking away. If it's a college that meets half of that financial need, there's wiggle room in there.
All right. Since it's very unlikely that most children will have enough in terms of an offer plus private scholarships, I've watched many parents that are very committed to children having skin in the game, saying, okay, before we start talking about how my involvement as a parent, let's talk about your involvement as a parent. So there are all sorts of these private scholarships that are out there. What is out there, and what do you generally recommend that people do to try to attain said scholarships?
Do you mean, okay, so you're still talking scholarships, not loans.
Yep.
So there's so many scholarships out there. I mean, I do whole separate sessions on teaching students how to effectively search for and find them. There's scholarship websites. The biggest thing is students have to be really consistent. And the ones that I see applying for 3 to 5 every single month are the ones that are actually receiving and having a return on investment.
Okay.
There's some great websites out there, fastweb.com, sally.com. There's unigo.com. There's really big ticket, scholarship organizations, but then there's Google searching. Students can Google search scholarships just by typing in Google, scholarships for high school seniors who live in whatever city or county and state you live in, and they're going to pull up some more local scholarships. The more
Okay.
search terms they use in a Google search, the better. Put in what they're going to study, maybe interests and abilities that they have or disabilities and things like that. It can be a little tedious, but if students spend about an hour a week searching and applying for them, it can really make a difference.
Awesome. All right. Private loans. Okay. So you're going to have instances on both sides. You could have an instance where you have a lower income, uh, a child that comes from a family that has a lower level of income, and they're really just got nothing the family could put towards it. And we're doing all these calculations that we're talking about, and there's still that little window in there between what they have from grants, scholarships, and loans and what the total cost is. And then you'll have some instances where you have children like, I want to go to this college. And the parents go, that is fantastic. Here's how much I have. Good luck with the rest. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when they're done with the loan that you said that they have available to them, there's a window, if not a significant window in there. What role do private loans play these days, and what kind of rates are there in both public and private loans? So why don't we first start with the role that private loans play?
So private loans are available for students to borrow to pay for that total financial aid gap. So after all financial aid is applied, they owe $30,000. They could borrow a private student loan for $30,000 to pay for that. The caveat with private student loans is there's a lot out there to choose from, but they are based on credit, whereas the federal direct student loan is not. So these, high school students just coming out of high school don't necessarily have credit established, and what creditors are looking for them to get the loans on their own, so they will need a cosigner. That's the big thing with private student loans, and a lot of parents aren't aware of that. But with that said, there are private student loans, especially some that I recommend that do have cosigner release options. So even if somebody cosigns after so many on-time payments, that cosigner can be released from that loan.
Okay.
So there's a lot of private loans out there. Interest rates vary. I mean, I've seen them as low as 3.5% all the way up to like 17%, depending on credit. The better credit, the lower the interest rate. So there's the private student loans, and then there are the federal Parent Plus loans,
Yes.
which is a loan that a parent can take on behalf of their dependent student. That tends to be easier to borrow. Like if any parent has credit issues, then the Parent Plus loan is an easier loan to borrow. But there's a lot of big changes happening to the Parent Plus loan program as of July 1st this year,
Oh, okay.
which families should know about. And, in the past, parents could borrow a Parent Plus loan for this total financial aid gap also, but they are now being limited to $20,000 a year with a lifetime cap of $65,000 per child.
And the public loans, um, how are those rates set? What are they now?
So the federal loans, the parent loan is up over 8.5% right now. The direct loans are up close to 8. They're capped. Like the federal direct loans won't go higher than 8.25. The Parent Plus loans won't go higher than 9.25, but they vary and change each July.
We already talked about appeals question that I have, but I want to turn a little bit over to you. It's the knowledge that you've been able to share with us all has been fantastic. Anybody who's taking notes who has a child who's a sophomore, junior, or senior in high school, I'm sure they appreciate it every minute of the time that you've spent with us today. But you tell us a little about our business and when do you generally get involved? You talked a little about your target audience and where you've had the most value for people are generally families making between 150 and 400,000. But if we talk a little bit about what it is that you do and what kind of return on investments are people often seeing when they work with you and your organization?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, my main goal is to really help families successfully navigate the college financial aid process and maximize their financial aid offers. So I have a couple different programs. I have a group coaching program for parents of high school seniors and their seniors to kind of guide them through the whole process, ensure they're doing everything that they need to do, be available to answer questions through like group, Facebook program. Um, I have digital downloads. So for the financial aid appeal process, I've created a done for you pre-written financial aid appeal letter template. Families can just plug in their own information to make the process super easy. I would say statistically, families on average will see more financial aid. I've seen it, I would say 25 to 30,000 more over the course of 4 years than in working with me if they were not to work with me. And that's just because of all the nuances involved with scholarships, financial aid appeals, and in a number of cases, even more than that. So a lot of the work I do is focused on kind of there's a 30-day financial aid boot camp, a group coaching program, digital downloads. I do offer one-on-one consulting. My business is very busy and I'm scaling. So those appointments are much more limited, but are available. And I do a ton of education on my social media channels for free.
Okay, so for people to learn about these different offerings,
Yeah,
they
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 can
find you where?
the thefsaguru.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
And everybody can see that below on your screen. So the fastforguru.com. Great, Tina. I really appreciate you spending time with us today. Is there anything you want to leave us off on? Can you think of anything else as it pertains to the experience that you'd want to share with college seniors and their parents about, how to stay positive through it?
Yeah, take a deep breath. It's not as overwhelming as it feels. Get the forms done early. That is huge. The one piece of information I'd like to leave families with is don't necessarily rule out the expensive colleges because you think you can't afford it. Because in many cases, I see better financial aid offers from these big colleges, making them even more affordable than public colleges.
Awesome.
So I would, set your sights high, apply for the expensive ones, the affordable ones, and just make sure you are looking at all of the deadlines and getting the forms done early and fill them out, even if you think you won't qualify.
Awesome. Tina, I want to thank you so much for your time, and I'm sure everybody will appreciate you taking your time today and sharing your expertise.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks again.